Hello, everybody. This is Timar's Two Worlds by Mór Jókai. Book 1, Chapter 2, The White Cat. The oarsmen consulted in the boat as to what was to be done. One advised cutting through the side of the mill below the waterline with an axe so as to sink it, but that would do no good. The current would drive the wreck down onto the ship. A second thought they ought to grapple the mill with hooks and give it a list away so as to direct it towards the whirlpool, but this counsel was also rejected, for the eddies would drag the boat down too. Timar ordered the man at the tiller to keep straight for the point of the island where the Lover's Rock lies. When they approached the rapids, he lifted the heavy anchor and swung it into the water without shaking the boat, which showed what muscular strength the delicate frame contained. The anchor took out a long coil of rope with it, for the water was deep there. Then Timar made them row as quickly as possible toward the approaching mill. Now they guessed his design. He meant to anchor the mill. Bad idea, said the sailors. The great mass will lie across the fairway and stop the ship. Besides, the cable's so long and slight that the heavy fabric will part it easily. When Euthymio Tricolus saw from the vessel Timar's intention, he dropped his chiboke in a panic, ran along the deck and cried to the steersman to cut the tow rope and let the ship drip downstream. The pilot didn't understand Greek, but guessed from the old man's gestures what he wanted. With perfect calmness, he answered as he leaned against the rudder, "There's nothing to grumble at. Timar knows what to do." With the courage of despair, Tricolus drew his dagger out of the girdle in order to cut the rope himself, but the steersman pointed toward the stern, and what Tricolus saw there altered his mind. From the lower Danube came a vessel toward them. An accustomed eye can distinguish it from afar. It has a mast whose sails are furled, a high poop, and 24 rowers. It's a Turkish brigantine. As soon as he caught sight of it, Tricolus put the dagger back in his sash. If he had turned purple at what he saw ahead, now he was livid. He hastened to Timea, who was looking through the glass at the peaks of the Paragrada. "Give me the telescope," he exclaimed in a hoarse voice. "Oh, how pretty that is," said Timea as she gave up the glass. "What?" "On the cliffs, there are little marmots playing together like monkeys." Euthymio directed the telescope toward the approaching vessel, and his brows contracted. His face was pale as death. Timea took the glass from his hand and looked again for the marmots on the rocks. Euthymia kept his arm round her waist. How they jump and dance and chase each other! How amusing! And Timea little knew how near she was to being lifted by the arm that held her and plunged over the bulwarks into the foaming flood. But what Euthymio saw on the other side brought back into his face the color it lost. When Timar arrived within the cast of the mill, he took a coil of anchor rope in his right hand. A hook was fastened to its end. The rudderless mass came quickly nearer, like some drifting antediluvian monster. Blind chance guided it. Its paddle wheel turned swiftly with the motion of the water, and under the empty outshoot the millstone revolved over its flour bin as if it was working hard. In this fabric devoted to certain destruction, there was no living thing except a white cat, which sat on the red-painted shingle roof and mewed piteously. When he got close to the mill, Timar swung the rope and hook suddenly round his head and aimed at the paddle wheel. As soon as the grappling iron had caught on the floats, the wheel, driven by water power, began to wind up the rope gently, so give the mill a gradual turn toward the Paragrada island, completing by its own machinery the suicidal work of casting itself on the rocks. "Didn't I say Timar knew what he was doing?" growled Johann Fabula, while Euthymio in joyful excitement exclaimed, "Bravo, my son," and pressed Timea's hand so hard that she was frightened and even forgot about the marmots. "There, look." And now Timea also noticed the mill. She required no telescope, for it and the ship were so near together that in the narrow channel they had only separated by about 60 feet. Just enough to let the diabolical machine get safely past. Timea thought neither of the danger nor of the deliverance, only of the forsaken cat. When the poor animal saw the floating house and its inhabitants so near to it, it leapt up and began running up and down the roof ridge, and to measure with its eye the distance between the mill and the ship, whether it dared to jump. "Oh, the poor little cat!" cried Timea anxiously. "If we could only get near enough for it to come over to us." But from this misfortune the ship was preserved by its patron saint, and by the anchor rope which wound up the paddle wheel and got shorter and shorter, and drew the wreck nearer the island further from the vessel. "Oh, the poor pretty white cat!" "Don't be afraid," Euthymio tried to console her. "When it passes the rock the cat will spring ashore and be very happy living with the marmots." Only, unluckily the cat, keeping on the hither side of the roof, could not see the island. When the St. Barbara got safely past the enchanted mill, Timea waved her handkerchief to the cat and called out first in Greek and then in the universal cat's language, "Quick, look, jump off!" But the animal, frantic with terror, paid no heed. At the very moment when the stern of the ship had passed the mill, the latter was suddenly caught by the current, swung round so that the grappled wheel broke, and liberated mass shot like an arrow down the stream. The white cat sprung up to the ridge. Ah! But the mill rushed on its fate. Below the great island is a great whirlpool. It's one of the most remarkable eddies ever formed by river giants. On every map it's marked by 2 arrows meeting in a corner. Woe to the boat which is swept in the direction of either arrow. Round the great funnel the water boils and rages in a seething cauldron, and in the middle of the circle yawns a bare abyss below. The whirlpool has worn a hole in the rock 120 feet deep, and what it takes with it into this tomb no one ever sees again. If it should be a man, he'd better look out for the resurrection. And into this place the current carried the mill. Before it reached there, it sprung a leak and got a list over. The axle of the wheel stood straight on end. The white cat ran along the highest point and stood there, humping its back. The eddy caught the wooden fabric, carried it round the wide circles 4 or 5 times, turning on its own axis, creaking and groaning, and then disappeared under the water with the white cat. Timea shuddered and hid her face in her shawl. But the St. Barbara was saved. Euthymio pressed the hands of the returning oarsman. Timar embraced. Timar might have expected Timea would say a friendly word, but she only asked, pointing to the gulf with a disturbed face, "What has become of the mill? Chips and splinters. And the poor cat?" The girl's lips trembled and tears stood in her eyes. "Well, that's up to her." "But the mill and the cat belonged to some poor man," said Timea. "Yes, but we had to save our ship and our lives, or else we should have been wrecked, and the whirlpool would have drawn us into the abyss and only thrown up our bones to the shore." Timea looked at the man who said this through the prism of tear-filled eyes. It was a strange world into which she gazed through the tears, that it should be permissible to destroy a poor man's mill in order to save your own ship, and that you should drown a cat so as not to get into the water yourself. She couldn't understand it. From this moment she listened no more to his fairy stories, but avoided him as much as possible.